I'm a third-year PhD student here at MIT. I'm actually speaking to you from the MIT campus, and it's snowing here in Boston. We're so glad you're here. This is the fifth talk of a six-part series happening Tuesdays and Thursdays this month. Reason for God is hosted by Crew at MIT, which I'm involved in. If you're from another campus, or if you're an MIT student who is somewhere else in the country or the world, it's wonderful that you're here as well. Crew is a caring community where you can explore faith or grow in your faith if you're already a Christian. We hope Reason for God, we host it in order to create a space where we can engage in some of the big questions about life and God. At these events, we welcome people from the whole spectrum of beliefs, whether you're an atheist, a Christian, a member of another faith, have lots of doubts, have been hurt by religion, or don't really care at all. No matter where you are in that spectrum, this is a place where you can be honest about what you think, honest about your questions and doubts, and it's a place where we can disagree with one another and disagree with what's said. All we ask is that we're all respectful and polite as we express ourselves and our disagreements. Before I introduce our speaker this evening, let me tell you about a few things that will be happening tonight. We'll have some Q&A at the end. Now, if you look on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a panel, and you'll see, if you click on the speech bubble, you'll see three sections: chat, participants, and Q&A. You can submit a question in the Q&A section, and you can upvote questions that you like so that we know which ones are the most popular. We'd really like to prioritize hearing questions from students tonight. Feel free to submit a question regardless of whether you're a student or not, but consider limiting the questions that you give so that everyone has a chance to ask a question. Please look at the other questions before you post one yourself. And if you find one that's similar to the one you're thinking about, please just vote that question up. Also, we'd kindly ask that you don't post your comments in the chat section. Now, if you've been to Reason for God in previous years, you'll know that normally we'd all be together eating dinner right now, but for obvious reasons, we can't do that this year. Instead, we'll be making a donation, and we have been throughout this series, for each person who's been attending each evening, to non-profits providing food to those in need. So that's another reason why I'm really thankful that you're here with us tonight. After the first four talks, we were able to give more than $800 to a local food pantry in Boston. And we'll be giving a donation tonight and also on Thursday as well. So make sure to come again and to invite your friends. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Jacob Daniel. Born and raised in India, Jacob grew up amidst diverse cultures and worldviews. He's an international speaker, apologist, and cultural analyst. Over the past 15 years, he's traveled and lived in different parts of the world, advocating a global alliance for defending human dignity. He received his pre-doctoral degree in India and did advanced studies in international development at the University of Manchester in the UK. It was during this time that his interest in theology and philosophy grew. Subsequently, he went to the University of Oxford. Jacob has a PhD in intercultural studies from Biola University. His specific interest is in the area of cultural analysis and the role and relevance of Christian faith in the public life. Jacob's speaking engagements have taken him across the globe to address topics such as culture and transformation, faith in the public square, cultural apologetics, and theology and mission in the 21st century. Jacob is married to Preeta, and they currently live in Los Angeles in California. Now, a fun fact about Jacob is that he can speak 5 languages fluently: English, Malayalam, Urdu, Hindi, and French. So it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Jacob Daniel to the virtual stage.
Well, thank you, Richard. Really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here with you on this series. I would like to thank crew and the staff at MIT for giving me this opportunity. Though I'm not able to see everyone, but I do have faith that you're able to see me and also listen to me. So in this talk, I would like to look at one of the greatest objections people have against Christianity, which can be summed up in just one word: exclusivity. How can Christians possibly claim that their religion is the only true religion and that there is, in any sense, or they are in any sense, the custodians of the truth? This claim might look like arrogant, and that's what we're going to be analyzing this evening time. So tonight, what I want to do is lay down some arguments that it is not necessarily arrogant to make exclusive claims about religions. Rather, it is this right to exclusivism that allows for intellectual integrity and humility necessary for an authentic public square. Following this, I will also provide reasons why Christianity stands apart in making claims that are unique and consequential for personal and social life. Now, the question raised against exclusivism are important questions, especially in light of the heightened awareness of religious diversity, particularly here in the West, either through the influx of people from other parts of the world, travel, or mass communication, and also that today religion is often seen as a primary reason for much of the conflict around the world. I would like to start by agreeing that some have used religion to divide people and to create strife for their personal, social, and political gains. There is, of course, danger in using the claim of exclusivity if it promotes a sense of superiority or intolerance that marginalizes other voices in the marketplace of ideas. It is not only morally wrong, but also antithetical to the claims of Christianity to enforce any form of religion or ideology on others. That this has happened is an unfortunate fact of history, but that it is genuine to the Christian faith can easily be demonstrated as false. Further, this kind of imposing attitude is witnessed in public behavior of all religious orientations and in all cultures around the world. Amidst the dominance of relativistic framework in our culture, there is no denying that Christians also struggle emotionally with this, their own claim, exclusive claim that they make, not just for intellectual reasons, but also for personal ones. Intuitively, we don't want to be seen as people who disregard the beautiful and helpful elements of other religions, nor do we desire to be confrontational over such important and personal matter. Now, growing up in India, in a multi-religious environment, and traveling and living across different cultural contexts, I have personally witnessed too many times how religious exclusivism has been used to abuse power and to marginalize people. I have lived through major riots, the riots of 1992 and 2002 in the city of Bhopal, where I grew up, between the Hindus and the Muslims, and barely survived it. So sectarian violence is a humanitarian nightmare, and I know this personally, so I don't speak it from a distance. It has overshadowed much of the social good that religions engender around the world. If the validity of any ideology or belief were strictly a matter of personal opinion, exempt from any rational scrutiny or test of truth, I admit that I would be the first one to make the claim that all religions lead to the same destination and are therefore equally valid. On the surface, such a claim would look reasonable, tolerant, loving, and generous, and would conform to the current relativism of our postmodern culture. But would such an accommodation to the cultural mood lead to a flourishing society? I seriously doubt it. I argue that much of the good we see around the world today are the direct products of rightly discerning religious and moral truths and analyzing those truths in our lived experiences. One such truth is the biblical idea that we all are created equal, endowed with intrinsic worth and equal dignity that may be violated, but never annihilated. This idea of intrinsic worth of all individuals, though not self-evident, has taken roots in the psyche of Western world in such a way that we now assume it to be given. The last speaker, Dr. Rebecca McLaughlin, had discussed this idea very well in her talk. And for the sake of time, I would like to direct you to her talk on this subject. So it is not in the blurring of the contrast that we gain clarity. But as cultural analyst Os Guinness puts it, contrast is the mother of clarity. So let me put forward some simple propositions or objections against religious pluralism and ask you to wrestle with them this evening. Now, religious pluralism presupposes some kind of generic approach which applies a lowest common denominator or essence to religions. It comes in two forms, and I'm borrowing this from the professor of religion, John Hick, a reductive pluralism, also called a non-sophisticated pluralism, or a non-reductive pluralism, also known as sophisticated pluralism. A non-sophisticated pluralism makes a broad sketch and claims that all religions are fundamentally true. That is, that all of the world's religions are teaching the same truth. It says that what is good about religions is what is common to the vast majority of them. This view, naively held by many as a badge of humility and virtue, is founded on the ignorance about the fundamental teachings of the world religions. For example, Islam teaches about a God distinct from his creation, who is omnipotent and omniscient. It teaches that man has fallen in sin and is in need of Allah's forgiveness, and there is an afterlife spent either in heaven or in hell. Buddhism, on the other hand, denies all of these fundamental beliefs of Islam. Classic Buddhism, I'm specifying here, classic Buddhism, denies the idea of ultimate reality being personal. It claims that the world is not created, that there is no enduring self, and that the destiny that awaits us all is one of complete annihilation, not judgment one way or the other. These fundamental differences about ultimate reality and the nature and the destiny of man exist among all religions. Yet clearly, all of these religions cannot be true, though they may all have some features in them. Every religion has its non-negotiable tenets, that is, their dogmas. And these non-negotiable tenets, when laid on the table, are found often contradictory. A cursory look at religion will reveal that not all religions teach the same thing. The question is whether those teachings matter or whether they are inconsequential. Also, it matters whether and how they facilitate human flourishing, something that we all are interested in. A contradiction is a very serious thing in the domain of logic, and a lived contradiction ultimately will work to the detriment of one's life. Contradictory religious claims may all be false, but they cannot all be true. The late atheist debater Christopher Hitchens knew as much and often brought up this basic objection to religious pluralism himself. After a debate with a Muslim cleric, Christian pastor Timothy Keller pointed out something very interesting and provided this insight to a student who argued that all religions are the same. Keller reflects on the conversation saying, I'm quoting him here, but as I spoke to him a bit afterward, I concluded that he was motivated by an underlying fear. If he granted that any religion made unique claims, then he would have to decide whether or not those claims were true. He did not want the responsibility of having to ponder, weigh it all, and choose. Among young scholars, secular adults, it is common to adopt this belief that all religions are roughly the same. Dare I say this is a form of emotional immaturity. Life is filled with hard choices, and it is childish to think that you can avoid them. It may seem to get you out of a lot of hard work, but the idea of equivalence of religions is simply a falsehood. Every religion, even those that appear more inclusive, makes its own unique claim. End of quote. Now, what does sophisticated pluralism claim? The sophisticated pluralism basically makes either of the two claims. First, that all of the religions are in fact false. That is, they are all human inventions and conditioned by culture to construe reality. Even if literally false, sophisticated pluralists say that religions remain effective in transforming people's lives, acting as a moral compass or psychological safety net, therefore should be held on the same footing. In making such a claim, the pluralist fails to acknowledge that it may be argued that their view may be as culturally conditioned just as an exclusivist. If a pluralist grew up in a pluralist society, chances are she will statistically be a pluralist. However, this sort of argument, which is a genetic fallacy, does not advance the cause of pluralism. We still need to give independent reason for why one view is true over another. The second form of sophisticated pluralism is the more metaphysically affirming view that each religion has a unique feature through which God may guide people, even if there is no common essence to all religions. Now, religious pluralism of both kinds raises many arguments against religious particularism. Before I tackle some of them, I would like to highlight the major objections against the idea of religious pluralism. I believe it shows a lack of intellectual integrity to assume that all religions are fundamentally aiming at the same good, that somehow creating such a state of blurriness or ambiguity about religions in the name of pluralization would not have its consequences. Ideologically defined, pluralization, which I so much appreciate, is where there is a competing number of worldviews available to its members. And that's the kind of society we want to live in. But when pluralization is extrapolated to mean relativism, then we tread on a course that demands our caution. One consequence of such extrapolation is the dismissal of any attempt to discover religious variances by undermining any platform for authentic civil engagement. We should explicate the basic assumption of religious pluralism. Where facts and pragmatism conflict with the idea that you are questioning the distinctions between religions, then the facts have to lose. It is commonsensical that a state of enforced ambiguity would only lead to more confusion rather than clarity in any collective enterprise. To prevent worldviews with fundamental differences to contest in the public arena of ideas is not the sign of a society that is oriented towards valuing intellectual liberty necessary for human flourishing. So if we accept without evidence that all religions are the same or have the same end or limit them to their commonalities, superficial commonalities, irrespective of the contradictions between them, what we will end up doing is enforcing non-discussion and removing any prospect of rational debate on ideas that are at the center of various religions. In an important study, Yale theologian Catherine Tanner, in the book Respect for Other Religions, makes the point that, I'm quoting her here, pluralist generalizations about what all religions have in common conflict with the genuine dialogue, in that they prejudge its result. Commonalities, which should be established in and through a process of dialogue, are constructed ahead of time by pluralists to serve as presuppositions of dialogue. The pluralists therefore close themselves to what people of other religions might have to say about their account of these commonalities. The pluralists' insistence on commonalities as a condition of dialogue shows an unwillingness to recognize the depth and the degree of diversity among religions as the positive important of them, end of quote. Now, to inhibit people's right to inquire into the truth concerning any religion in our collective enterprise will not facilitate the formation of an authentic public square. To give you an example, this infringement is now evident in the case of anti-conversion law that is currently being enforced in 6 states in India. This draconian law exists under the guise of religious pluralism. However, it penalizes any movement from one faith to another and undermines the constitutional provision for not only the practice of religion, but also the profession of it. And I think the West may not remain untouched by it. I also argue that religious pluralism, contrary to its assumed perception, does not take into consideration intellectual humility, which reflects the degree to which people are free to evaluate the accuracy of their beliefs and are willing to change them or replace them when presented with compelling evidence that they are wrong. While inclusivism impedes the metacognitive process involving thinking about how one thinks, exclusivism by necessity opens itself for evaluation. It invites people to investigate and thereby creates an environment that could give rise to greater respectfulness, tolerance, and open-mindedness when people are faced with views contradicting to theirs. If every religious view is a priori asserted to be essentially equal, there is never an impetus to allow one's belief to be challenged. Consequently, one may never actually find oneself being wrong on a matter of religious doctrine. We wouldn't allow this kind of a priori inclusivism into our science department or other disciplines. So why would we validate it in the theological arena? A claim to exclusivity allows for defeaters, and it allows us to question the very premise of religious pluralism, that all road leads to God. While the intended purpose of religious pluralism's claim is to respect all roads, what religious pluralism does is fail to make crucial distinctions, since some paths are not attempting to direct anyone to God, such as Buddhism, which makes no such claim of leading anyone to a personal ultimate reality, but instead to an ultimate annihilation of the self. Now, religious pluralism is in itself particularistic. The religious pluralist is not taking a neutral stance. Rather, she is taking a stance that reflects a certain commitment, a certain view about the nature of religion. She makes knowledge claims like other exclusivists do. Pluralists believe that they have a virtue that the exclusivists do not have. Logically, the pluralist is being an exclusivist like any Christian, or a Buddhist, or a Hindu, or a Jain. Wherever you land on this issue, you will be taking an authoritative stance, and to claim otherwise is arrogance. In order to endorse a middle way as the solution for religious variances, we may have to embrace unreason and side with illogic. Now, to develop this important point, let us consider a very famous analogy concerning the relation of religions. And I'm aware that this is way too common an analogy, but there is something that I want to highlight here. The story tells of a group of blind men describing an elephant. One man touches its trunk and compares it to a snake. Another feels its ear and compares it to a fan. The third man places his hand on the elephant's leg and says it is like a tree trunk. And that's how the story goes. Now, Leslie Newbigin, who was a missionary to India, makes a vitally important observation about this analogy. The real point of the story is constantly overlooked, he says. The story is told from a point of view of the king and his courtiers, who are not blind, but can see that the blind men are unable to grasp the full reality of the elephant and are only able to get hold of a part of it. The story is constantly told in order to neutralize the affirmations of the great religions, to suggest that they learn humility and recognize that none of them can have more than one aspect of the truth. But of course, the real point of the story is exactly the opposite. If the king were also blind, there would be no story. The story is told by the king, and it is the immensely arrogant claim of one who sees the full truth, which all the world's religions are only groping about. It embodies the claim to know the full reality, which relativizes all the claims of the religions. So when you think it through, I believe pluralism may actually be the most unfair of all truth claims. Why do I say so? The truth is that the majority of people around the world are not exposed to pluralism. It has never even crossed their mind to think that all views are equally valid. People around the world have lived with solidarity for the majority of human history, regardless of maintaining diverse religious truth claims. Ironically, the so-called inclusivism may be the most exclusive of all worldviews. And the apt example is the Baha'i religion that claims to be the most inclusive religions. However, they maintain the exclusivity of their being, unlike any other religion. Most of the world has no chance of coming to believe it. They still function within an exclusivist framework. Tom Greggs, a professor of divinity at Aberdeen University, offers this observation that regardless of what part of the world you are in, the problem with the exclusivist approach is a real one. Even now, whenever anybody goes to a hospital or wherever whenever they have to fill a declaration form where it says religion, no one just says yes or no. They provide a very specific answer. Everybody offers an unapologetic description of the religious tradition they belong to and the particular religious thought to which they ascribe. Now let me shift the gear and ask this question. So what about the claim that it is arrogant to be an exclusivist? To such an emotionally challenging question, we always come up with some analogy to explain religious pluralism that goes something like this. All religions are like several paths going up on a mountain, reaching for the same destination on top. If we look at this analogy seriously, there is an important question that we should be asking. Who has the right perspective to say that all paths lead to the same destination? The one who is on the summit. And a religious pluralist would agree that it is God who is there. So when a religious pluralist makes a claim that all paths lead to God, she assumes the role of God, or is at least making a claim to have a God's eye perspective. The analogy may look wise, but the argument is made from a place of making oneself godlike. And that is an arrogant assertion. How does the enlightened pluralist know that the devout Sunni is wrong about the exclusive claims found in the Quran? Where did the pluralist get the knowledge that she knows that the Quran and the New Testaments are both pointing to God? Now, tolerance and arrogance are not properties of what one happens to believe. They are properties of how we behave, our attitude and our actions. Arrogance, for the sake of the argument, doesn't make anyone wrong. This would be a textbook example of genetic fallacy. One may be arrogant, yet still be right. For someone to have a particular belief that others disagree with and even find objectionable by itself is not a mark of arrogance or intolerance. It is simply irrelevant to the truth of a particular religious worldview, whether its adherents are arrogant or not. It doesn't affect the truth that they proclaim. How you live out that belief, how you interact with those who disagree with you, that's where these issues of arrogance and intolerance come in. If it is arrogant to say that you are right and others are wrong, then the same thing applies to the pluralist when they question the exclusivist. For they must ask the positive claim that they have to make the positive claim that it is true that all religions lead to God. It's the pluralist arrogant simply in virtue of making this exclusive claim. Now, why Christian exclusivism matters? James Orr, in The Christian View of God and the World, maintains that there is a definite Christian view of things, which has a character, coherence, and unity of its own, and stands in sharp contrast with the counter theories and speculations. A Christian worldview has the stamp of reason and correspondence to reality and can stand the test of historical inquiry and experiential fit. While answering the four worldview questions that every religious worldview attempts to answer of origin, meaning, morality, and destiny, Christianity cogently maintains the three tests for truth: logical consistency, which is internal consistency, empirical adequacy, and existential relevance. It is this cogency that has resulted in the positive impact that Christianity has had, not only on the Western civilization, but also around the world. I will recommend a few books on this subject. In addition to Tom Holland's book titled Dominion, How the Christian Revolution Remade the World, I would like to actually recommend two books, one by Vishal Mangalwadi. The book is called This Book Changed Everything, The Bible's Amazing Impact on Our World. And the second book is by Alvin, How Christianity Changed the World. These books will be very helpful in knowing as to the impact that Christianity has had, not only on the Western civilization, but also around the world. Now, if you take any philosophical or religious system, Christian or non-Christian, you will see that they are oriented primarily in one of these three ways. And I would like to give credit to Christian apologist Michael Ramsden, who has elaborated much on this. Now, these three orientations are: first, epistemologically, as a system of thought, where if you master certain beliefs, this knowledge will give you the keys to the mysteries of life and the universe. The second is existentially, as a system of feeling, where if you engage with the mystical, it will give you a sense for your life and everything around you. Pragmatically, as a system of doing, where if you do certain things and put certain practices, principles into practices, you will understand the purpose for your existence. Now, some systems do combine all these together. For example, classical Hinduism, which emphasizes on all three: right thinking, right feeling, right doing. However, Christian faith is the only faith that does not orient itself to one or all of these systems for the sake of salvation. To be a Christian, it is not simply to champion certain set of beliefs, experiences, or practices, though all three are important in the Christian life. However, they are not sufficient condition to reach God and to actually know Him and to come into relationship with God. Christian faith is not a system of do's and don'ts or knowns and unknowns. The incarnation of Jesus was not for the purpose of bringing a new thought about God or new experience of God, or to install new practices for serving God, although it did all of them. Rather, Jesus came into the world as God. Here is not merely a prophet speaking on God's behalf at second hand. Here is God Himself speaking to us. To quote Karl Barth, we have to do with God Himself as we have to do with this man. God Himself speaks when this man speaks in human speech. Every religion has a founder, a prophet, and some religions claim not to, coming to show us where God is and how to find the ultimate reality. Jesus is the only one who says, I am God who have come to find you. If every other founder says, I am a prophet, I'm a sage, and Jesus says, I am God. Now, what that means is that Jesus is either wrong and inferior to all other religions and their founders, He is deranged or crazy, or He is who He says He is. C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity puts it this way, and I'm quoting him here. I'm trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about Him, meaning Jesus. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept His claim to be God. That is the one thing we must not say. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things that Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic or on the level with man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him for a fool. You can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come into any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. If Christ is who He says He is, then the implications for our entire understanding of reality is monumental. It's not like Christians just conspired that they need to be superior. But if you believe that Jesus fulfills the prophecies of hundreds of years, that is open to investigation, and that He is the resurrected Son of God, then you have to believe that He is the way to God. Christians are forced by these facts. All that faithful Christians are doing is simply articulating His own view. That is Jesus's view, the view of this God-man Jesus. The claim of Christian exclusivity rests on the claims of Jesus Christ Himself. and the historical validity of those claims, particularly attested by his bodily resurrection, a claim that I want to invite you to investigate, and the advent of the Christian faith with the force with which it did, Christian exclusivists do not make exclusive claims about Christians, the church, or the creeds, but they simply retell the story of Christ, who makes the claim himself. Faced with these facts of history, it makes the claim that Christ is the ultimate revelation. I usually tell my friends, before you investigate other worldviews and religions, try Christianity. Why? Because it can easily be tested and falsified. Only if you can discredit Jesus' resurrection. Christianity rises or falls on this account. As one of the first followers of Jesus himself admitted in 1 Corinthians from the Bible, 1 Corinthians chapter 15. But if there is no resurrection of the dead, then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain. Your faith is also in vain. Moreover, we are even found to be false witnesses of God because we testified against God that he raised Christ, whom he did not raise, if in fact the dead are not raised. For if the dead are not raised, then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is worthless. You are still in your sins. The resurrection of Jesus is that fundamental to the Christian faith. It demands a response to the truth that Jesus demonstrated as the Son of God. So it is in the knowing of this resurrected Christ that a Christian finds the way, the truth, and the life. This manner of incarnation is utterly unique to Christian faith. Jesus Christ defined all of reality in reference to himself. Scripture says that he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. This is why you cannot remove Christ from the Christian religion. Almost all major world religions have founders who could theoretically be replaced by someone else. It didn't have to be Siddhartha Gautama who founded Buddhism. It could have been someone else. It didn't have to be Muhammad who founded Islam. It could have been someone else. It didn't have to be Vardhama Mahavir who founded Jainism. It could have been someone else. You could remove the founder from the system and the system remains. But you cannot remove Christ from Christian, who did not claim to show the way, the truth, and the life, but claimed to be the way, the truth, and the life. In this regard, he has no rival. He is utterly unique. When Christians defend exclusivism, they are not claiming that they are morally superior. Rather, they affirm a presumed sense of universal morality because all people are made in the image of God. Based on my own experiential witness among different cultures, I argue that Christianity contains the greatest impetus for this genuine kind of tolerance. The Bible proclaims that all people are created in the image of God and as such are to be treated with greater dignity and respect. People are oriented towards sensus divinitatis, a sense of divinity, sensus moralitas, a sense of morality. Study all religions, or for that matter, those who claim not to be a religion, and it becomes obvious that they all have common sense of morality. This is particularly seen in the adherence of both positive and negative golden rule by world religions. Though I can talk more about that, but time doesn't allow me to do that. There are, of course, times when those practicing other religions put Christians to shame regarding good works. However, this only tells us that we need to be respecting and not disrespecting each other's ethical code. However, it does not tell us about the validity of those religious systems. Nevertheless, Christianity differs from other religions not so much at the level of ethics and morality, but on the basis of a restored relationship with God, which then has moral and ethical implications and results. We love God because he first loved us. We don't do good works to be saved. We do good works because we are saved. And there the world religions are divided into two systems, a system of merit and a system of grace. By grace, I mean unmerited favor. The only religion that falls firmly into the category of God's total grace is Christianity. For other religions, human merits is the means to reach God. But for Christians, merits get in the way of an eternal relationship with our Creator. This is why the Bible teaches that how religions can take people away from God, not always to God. Christianity competes with no other religion in this regard. Christ is the only person who claims to offer this grace and the knowledge of salvation right here and now. Now, to conclude, I would like to say that Christian faith has a very radical answer to the question of many paths. There may be millions of paths to the person of Jesus Christ, but only one way to God, through Jesus Christ. This is what the disciples preached. Salvation is found in no one else but Jesus, for there is no other name under heaven given to men by which we must be saved. The exclusive truth claims of Christian faith cannot be infringed upon, accepted or rejected based on our individual preferences, but stands or falls on its own integrity. It offers a stability of thought, a unity of comprehensive insight that impacts not only the religious sphere, but also the whole of thought and reality in which we live. Our intrinsic moral aspirations fit well with the Christian narrative of the supreme ethic of love demonstrated through Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. And this way of supreme ethic of love, argues Christian theologian Alistair McGrath, does not merely offer a new way of beholding our world, but an enhanced capacity to live within the world and to cope with its uncertainty and complexity, as well as our own frailty and failings. I invite you to test this. By acknowledging the distinctions and not homogenizing world religions, Christians prevent insulting those who hold different views than they do. They maintain the necessary foundation of civility, that is, belief should be adopted by the dictates of conscience. And for that to happen, we must acknowledge the given, that there are differences, and that truth will always work to exclude that which contradicts it. Religious dialogues and constructive engagement requires mutual respect, not the equality of belief. Though they are at the root irreconcilable, there remains the possibility of persuasion amid worldviews. And it is this possibility of persuasion that must be maintained for the sake of civil and authentic public square. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that talk.
Thank you.
We'll now move into a time of Q&A. I'll be reading the questions to you from the Q&A section in descending order of upvotes. So everyone, please take a moment to upvote your favorite questions and add new ones as we go along. As a reminder, please look at the questions before submitting yours so that we don't have duplicate questions. Instead, just vote on the one that is similar to yours. Upvote questions you would most like to see answered, and I'll check them off as we go through them. So this one was not only the most upvoted one, but the first one. Why can't all the blind people in your elephant feeling analogy talk amongst themselves and by combing their knowledge figure out the full truth?
Good question. I think it would be, if we would arrive at truth, so when we talk about this elephant analogy, there are people at different positions trying to perceive the reality and trying to understand. Now, understand that they are blind, but when we talk about the reality, there's this perspective that is given of one who can see it, right? And that's why, even within the Christian tradition, this aspect of revelation is important and necessary. So reason is not merely the vehicle of truth. Revelation is as well. That's a Christian affirmation as well. Revelation and reason go together. They don't conflict. They shouldn't conflict, but they should go together. So if we look at this analogy, a claim is being made that we can arrive at together when we talk about the reality itself that we experience. And if we do, imagine this, all these 5 people making claims about the reality that they perceive. Think through, how would they come to a conclusion, a common conclusion? And what would it look like when they have their own perspective about these realities that they are encountering, unless and until there is an outside revelation into it? And Christian faith claims to hold that revelation that does not conflict with reason and the lived realities of people. And one of the greatest revelations, and it's not merely an abstract idea, but the very person of Jesus Christ who claims to be the truth. I am the truth, the way, and the life. Not a truth, a way, a life. He is the very revelation of God. That's why he said, I and my Father are one. That's why this story of bringing us to the true reality of our existence, Christ plays such a vital role.
Makes a lot of sense. As a follow-up question to that, on the point about revelation being necessary, you touched on this a bit, but how can we trust that that revelation is in fact true?
Good. Yeah. And every religion claims to have certain sort of revelations. What it calls for is that, and I was talking about this, we're not seeing revelation as separate from or not informing our lived realities or our rational thought and engagement. When we talk about revelation, it complements our thought, our reason and understanding. When we talk about the Christian faith, that is why it is necessary to investigate and inquire in terms of, because whole of scripture, as we see it as a revelation, points to the person of Jesus Christ. And that's why, as a Christian, when we are making exclusive claim, and I made this in my talk, that we are not focusing in terms of the different faculties that we have. We are focusing on the fact that on the person of Jesus Christ. So that's why I always say that when someone questions the exclusivity of Christian faith, they are basically questioning the claims of Jesus himself. There is no way one can say that exclusivists are wrong, at the same time hold that Jesus is a good moral teacher. That is why the very person of Jesus Christ as the truth is important, and he is the ultimate revelation of God for people.
The next question we have here, how should Christians maintain an exclusive worldview while fostering an inclusive environment?
Very good question. And so a Christian does live in that kind of, I don't know if I should call it a paradox, right? While there are these exclusive claims, they are inclusive in the nature that this salvation, the gospel of salvation, is open for all people in all cultures, right? It includes, it's wide enough to include everyone into it. It doesn't exclude anyone. This is why it is important to actually point to the very fundamental principle of Christian faith that is evident in the very beginning itself, where it demonstrates, if you read the book of Genesis, the very early principles that is offered to the church is one of this, that we all are created equal in the image of God. We are created by God and he's put an image on us. And that does not exclude anyone. That does not exclude any culture, right? So in that regard, it is inclusive in nature where no one is excluded. But when it comes to the claims of Christian faith on the person of Jesus Christ, right, we maintain exclusive claims, not because we want to, not because we want to somehow be seen as superior to others, but it rests on the person of Jesus Christ and the claims that he made.
I think this next one is related to that question of inclusivity. What about one of the main characteristics of Christianity being a missionary religion? Trying to spread the word of God implicitly says we believe we are right. Should we still persist on this?
I would ask this. What is wrong in implicitly believing that you are right if you know that you are right? Don't we do that always? Don't we do that about everything that we want to convince others of? What's wrong in implicitly or even explicitly? And I think as Christians, the whole project of is an explicit proclamation of the truth of the gospel. It's not merely implicit. Now, having said this, I don't condone those who may have ulterior motives, that they don't make it explicit to others and bring in coercive means to bring about their faith to other people, including Christianity, and that has happened in the past. It still happens. That's the sad part of it. But remember, when Christ is calling people to make disciples of other nations, disciples of other people, it's not in any way a hidden, a secret group, tradition or something of that sort. Look at the early disciples. When they went out to all nations, to all places, including the country where I belong to, or I come from, the country of India. We see St. Thomas, the disciple of Jesus, who is known to be the doubting Thomas. It took a doubting Thomas to land in India and bring the gospel of Jesus Christ. And look at the life of the early disciples. They were not implicit about the exclusive claim that they were holding to. If that was the case, they wouldn't have given away their life. They were all martyred for the sake of the truth. And that's happening even today. A lot of people who are bold enough to bring the truth of the gospel to others are doing it more explicitly than implicitly. Having said that, I'll also say that Christian faith is one that is rooted on the foundations of love. That's the supreme ethics. And when love is the supreme ethics, Christians have not been given any power to coerce others in demanding that love to Jesus. That's not possible. Love has to be done volitionally. It has to be done with one's own will. Therefore, the sharing of the good news is vital to the Christian faith, but it's not dependent on the fact that it has to be forcefully enforced onto others. It has to be accepted willfully.
Thanks for that answer. And thanks for that question, Jorge. The next question is from Sohan. The liar, lunatic, Lord trilemma leaves out the legend option, that divinity and statements suggesting this were ascribed to him by later followers who needed a divine figurehead. So basically, they made it up.
Yeah, that's a very great question, and one that calls. So we need to be questioning then the very historicity of Jesus himself, and not just that. We need to be questioning the validity of the scriptures that are available to us today. But a professional historian, if you reach out to one, it's hard to find someone who would make a claim that they would question the historicity of Jesus and the claims that he made, and on the very fact of the resurrection itself and the impact that it had on his disciples when they went around sharing about that very resurrection that happened. So if you look at one way to do this is that with any kind of legend, what would you do to find out whether something is legend or not? You want to know, there might be different criteria in terms of if this is a legend, by who, when, and where. And these should be the same questions we should be asking with regards to the person of Jesus Christ and the scriptures. And there is enough evidence available in terms of manuscripts, in terms of external evidences, that makes it very clear. It becomes suspicious if someone claims that this was merely a legend. And at the end of the day, I would say, whoever has asked this question, if this was merely a legend, the question is, how could this legend transform a bunch of people who were hiding and scared, not knowing what awaits them, right before crucifixion, and even after crucifixion, before they had seen the resurrected Jesus? what happens between that time and the time of the resurrection of Jesus, that they are completely transformed in their perspective, to the point, if you look at the person of, if you look at Paul himself, the one who was going about questioning this very fact about the validity of Jesus Christ and imposing torturous laws over people who were following this person of Jesus Christ, and how his life was transformed when he saw the resurrected Jesus Christ. And this is even happening today. You know, the people are responding to Jesus not as someone who is a legend, created being or created narrative about Jesus Christ, but to the very person of Jesus Christ, who is real to them in terms of relationship, in terms of their personal life and the meaning that it provides.
And then the next question is from Sohan, or less of a question, I suppose, more of a statement. The blind people feeling around are using mutually demonstrable evidence. And now, when you were talking, Jacob, you said that the religious revelation was like the king, I suppose, who has an outside perspective. Sohan is saying religious revelation is more like a blind person asking you to trust that they once felt something and they know what it is. How would you respond to that?
So this analogy will fail when you apply the Christian faith, for example, right? But this is the analogy people give who hold to a pluralist view. This is not an analogy that someone who hold to an exclusivist view would hold to this analogy. So it is the burden of proof is on the exclusivist when they use this analogy, and that was the whole reason I was using it in my talk. With regards to Christian faith, God has intervened in all cultures at all times. God has reached out to all people at all times. And there are, and no Christians deny that all truth is God's truth, regardless of where it is found, among who it is found, right? But that truth must point to a telos. And from a Christian perspective, that truth that we long for and we want to be part of, and that should inform our life and give us a perspective for life, must aim to the person of Jesus Christ. And that's what is done historically, if you look, in terms of the prophecies, in terms of what's been said about the life of Jesus Christ, how he lived his life and fulfilled the purpose for which he came. So he is the one showing us, revealing himself with the truth, and calling, just like he called St. Thomas, right? To examine. He provided evidence of the truth of the fact that he was who he came to be. And he revealed himself. And he does that even today. He calls people to investigate the truth claims that he made. And I was arguing earlier that there is no way you can see him as a moral teacher and not take into regard the claims that he made. Either he was lunatic, as we said, or he was who he said he was. It demands a response from an individual, whoever it may be. We can make a choice. And as I said, that it is founded on the fact that it is founded on the supreme ethics of love. It is not enforced onto others, but it is shared with others, seeking demanding a response to the truth that Jesus lays before them.
All right, we've got, I think, time for maybe one or two more questions. I think this one that's getting a few upvotes is a good one. Another one from Jorge. People usually follow their parents' or geographical locations' religion. How is this fair for free individuals, and how can we guarantee our belief is truly ours?
A very good question. And statistically, if we see, this is true, right? Where you live and the religion you're surrounded by, it does have influence on you. I grew up, however, I might be an exception here, where I can give an example as to I grew up in a majority Hindu and majority Muslim community in the city where I come from. I did not come to the Christian faith through the fact that I was born in a Christian faith. I was greatly influenced by various religions around me. Now, let's look at this argument. So when we claim that someone who is born into a family, right? The thing about Christianity is that it doesn't limit one's faith on the basis that one is born into a certain kind of family. Now, when we make such a claim, this makes truth as a function of birth. So if you're born into a family, you belong into that religion or worldview. So truth functions as we make truth as a function of birth. So say if I say that if I was born into a Nazi Germany at the time when Hitler was ruling, I would most likely, statistically, likely be a Nazi. And would this make Nazism true? Because I was born there and because I agreed with what was going on there. So that's the very question we should be asking. So with regards to Christian faith, that is why it is not limited in any sense in terms of who can come to Christ. It's very inclusive in that nature, that it's the scope of Christianity is for all cultures at all periods, at all times. All are invited. It is not dependent on where you were born, how you were born, all right? Not dependent on how much you know or how much you do. And that's what I was pointing to in my talk, that it's not a merit-based, it's not based on your merit. It can actually impede you coming to Christ or you coming to God, whereas we depend on the merits of Jesus Christ. And that's open for all people at all time. So we should be careful when we make that claim that someone who is born in other country and they would hold to a certain faith or worldview or religion, and therefore that faith or worldview is valid. Because we may have to do that with all kinds of worldviews and ideas. And historically, if we tend to do that, we may have to justify a lot of evil that's been done.
And then I think we can do one more.
Yeah.
And the next one, and I think this is also a good one. How can we say Christianity is 100% correct? Even if Jesus was the Son of God and the resurrection is true, why does that mean that every other part of Christianity is also true? I know that a lot of people, even if they're willing to accept, okay, I could see Jesus being the Son of God, there are all these other beliefs, it feels like, that come with Christianity, which you might struggle to believe. And what makes all of the other things true?
Sure. I wish I could talk to the person who asked this question and try and find out what is it that they disagree with. Because here I can definitely see that they agree with the fact that Jesus, if we accept that Jesus was the Son of God and that he resurrected, and the claims that he made that he was one with God, he was God, that would have an impact and influence on all aspects of our life. That should have. And we need to understand that Christianity is not just merely about one aspect of our life. As it informs, Christians are not merely Christians on Sundays when they worship and all. It informs all aspects of their lives. So when we trust in Jesus as the Son of God, then we need to be trusting also in terms of what God has spoken about that Son of God, right? What is it that, so in terms of, if we accept that Jesus is the Son of God, then we should also be accepting the fact that Christianity offers answers to the questions of origin, meaning, morality, and destiny that all worldviews attempt to do as well. If that is the case, then there is an invitation for anyone who is saying that, okay, I'm willing to accept Jesus as the Son of God and he is resurrected. Then there is this invitation to actually inquire and find out what does Bible talks about the origin, the meaning, and the morality and destiny of humankind, and does that conform with the lived realities that we have? And is there a consistency between these ideas? So it's an invitation for a person who is asking this question to find out and see the difference that it makes in your life, and also impacts other lives through you.
Thank you very much, Jacob, for those answers and for your talk earlier. And I know that there are still some unanswered questions in the Q&A section, and perhaps some of the question askers might not have felt completely satisfied, or they might have a hanging question, or they might want to take you up, Jacob, on your invitation to explore further. So after this, we'll be giving everyone a chance to continue the discussion with Jacob. We'll close this presenting view and we'll go back to our tables, and you should look for a table called Speaker Table. We'll also have a few other tables designated for further Q&A. There'll be some crew staff and other leaders there who can help process your questions. Or feel free to stay in the room and just hang out with your friends at your own tables. So I've got a few other things to let you all know about before we finish up here. One is that we're always looking to improve the Reason for God series, and we'd love to have your feedback on tonight. Please follow the link that's about to be posted in the chat to a Google form. One thing we're offering for free are some outstanding books that are great for exploring some of the big questions about God and Christianity. If you'd like a copy, you can pick a book in the feedback form. Students only, please. Some of the books we're offering include The Reason for God by Tim Keller, after which this series is named, How to Be an Atheist, Why Many Skeptics Aren't Skeptical Enough, and Our Deepest Desires, How the Christian Story Fulfills Human Aspirations, which was written by a previous speaker in this series, Dr. Greg Gansel. Our next talk will be by Brandon Cleaver, asking the question, doesn't the Bible condone slavery? Which will be this Thursday at 8 p.m. We'll have a different link, so check out our website, reasoningforgod.com, for details. Feel free to invite your friends to join. And as I said earlier, I'm so glad that you joined us this evening, and I really hope that you'll join us again for our next and final talk. So just to repeat what I said earlier, please join a table after we close this window if you want to stick around and talk to the speaker or some of the others here who can help process some of the questions that you want to talk about. So thank you again, and have a good evening.